Everybody has questions that they wish they could sit down and ask people. I consider myself a little bit of an interviewer, and these questions that I have today certainly would be fun to ask. My name is Phil, and you're listening to The Lip. This episode is going to be fun for me only because I get to ask the questions that I would like to ask certain individuals who I will most likely not ever meet, or in one case, a question that I didn't ask when I had the chance to ask it. But certainly, the idea of sitting in front of somebody and giving them a full interview and asking them a lot of questions is what most interviewers or podcast hosts do from time to time. I've interviewed a few people. I've had shows with some great guests. However, in the process of asking those questions to those guests, I'm always asking them questions that I genuinely want to know, but I don't overstep any bounds. Some of these questions to some of these people that I would love to ask may be a little bit off. And the sort of question that if you were to ask it, you probably wouldn't get an accurate answer. But it's fun to think that you could ask that question, let's say, off the record, you and that person, and get the answer, the actual answer, the truth. But you would have to be sworn to secrecy in order to get the answer and never reveal your answer to anybody else. Some of these questions may be things that people wanted to know, but I think that it would be more worth it even if nobody else knew the answer to these questions, but I got to know the answer. I imagine that there's people out there who have questions like they would sit down with OJ Simpson, and of course, we can't do that now, but have him sit down in a chair, no cameras, no other media, just them and OJ, and ask the very simple question: did you actually do it or not? Under the pretenses that obviously he's already been found innocent, so double jeopardy would have applied, and of course now he's actually passed away, so it really doesn't matter. But just out of absolute curiosity, you'd just like to know the answer to that question, right? I have a series of questions here that I want to know, and they're specifically to me things from antiquity, a couple modern people, but questions nonetheless that I feel that I need to know the answer to. And unfortunately, like I said, if I had the opportunity, and I stress the golden opportunity to sit before even one of these people and ask them the question that popped in my mind, and only one question. Sit us in front of a table, me and that person, nobody else around, because in order to get the true answer to these questions that I want to ask, it's pretty safe to say that the person that I'd ask the question of would absolutely not tell you anything if there was anybody around. But on the off chance that they would answer the question, I would very much love to hear the answer. But of course, like I said, out of respect for the person, I would absolutely be okay with being sworn to secrecy to know the answer to the question just for my own curiosity. On that note, it's time to fill in the blank. Here's the question. I'm a former corrections officer, yes, and I never asked any of the inmates what they did. I never did. If I wanted to know, I could have actually gone and looked up their record as a corrections officer. We can do that. But I never did. I didn't want to know what those people did. Didn't matter to me. They were convicted and they're now serving their sentence. But the fill in the blank question will absolutely be, is there even one person that I was genuinely curious about what they did and kind of wanted to know what it was? The answer to that question is yes. I'm not going to name any names, but there was definitely a particular inmate that I interacted with on a regular basis and had a decent rapport with. And of course, just like anybody else, this guy was in jail for life. And I mean, he did something bad, he did something horrible in order to be put in that position and at least convicted of it. And I kept with my policy and I never asked him and I never looked him up to find out what it was. There were plenty of my coworkers who did, in fact, look up all kinds of inmates to find out what they were in for. I never did it. But this one inmate, I will have to attest, I was very curious as to what he did. But I never took the step in order to find out. So it'll be a mystery for me forever. The question is, was there even one inmate that I questioned what they did and would love to have found out? But the answer would have been yes, there was just one. But I didn't ever ask him what he did. Now it's time to go into the questions that I have in the main event. I think that these questions are, whew, I think they hit hard. Personally, they do to me, and that's the idea. These are questions that I would ask. Granted, some of you out there may or may not consider some of these questions to be relevant or even interesting, but maybe one or two of you out there just might. I'm thinking if I feel that this segment is okay, I may actually come up with a few more of these because the short list of people that I've got here now definitely are interesting to me, and I think that there's probably an even longer list of questions for antiquity and around that I would love to ask that you would never really get a straight answer to. But now, on that note, I'm going to start off with which one of these? Yes, we'll go here first because this one is about one of my favorite groups in history. Now, I've always loved history, and I think that the statement from a particular movie that nobody doesn't like history, they just don't like their own history. One of my favorite times in history has always been surrounding the Roman Empire, particularly in the Punic War setting. Now, the Punic Wars were wars where Rome was fighting a very powerful empire from Africa known as the Carthaginians. Now, the Carthaginians had this very interesting office, not to bore you too much with the history or all that stuff, but their leading class, they had sort of a senate, let's just say, and the rulers of Carthage were actually two individuals. They didn't leave all the power with one. They had two, and these two were called sovereigns. These two individuals made the final say based on all the information that was gathered to them, and then they would come together and they would make a specific decision. Now, I wouldn't be able to ask just one because the decision would have been joint. So in this case, I would have to sit both soffits down and ask them this very specific question about one of my favorite people in all of history. In fact, he may well be my absolute favorite person in history. Hannibal Bossa, the general of the Carthaginian army who fought in the last couple of Punic Wars. The man who was always depicted as the guy who took the elephants over the Alps, who essentially outflanked Rome and nearly defeated them. Because my favorite battle in history, not that there's a necessary, how can I put it? Calling a battle something your favorite is a little weird, but the strategy behind it is still my favorite, and it was ingenious, and it just was incredible. The Romans had no defense for it, and they would be considered one of the greatest armies who's ever in existence. But Hannibal's strategy against them in this one particular battle was to fall back, let the Romans advance, continue to fall back, let the Romans advance, continue to fall back, let the Romans continue to advance. The Romans didn't notice that the army was falling back, and they were falling back wide, so that as the Carthaginian army moved back and Hannibal's troops moved back, they were also moving around. So what they ended up doing was encircling a huge Roman army, which was, I don't know, 3 times the size of the Carthaginians. And as the Romans kept moving forward, the Carthaginians kept moving back until all the Romans were encapsulated by the Carthaginian army, which was smaller. At this point, the entire Roman army was now encircled by the smaller Carthaginian army, which wiped everybody out, killed them all. Every single Roman in that battle was killed. And by nature, they called that battle the Battle of Annihilation because that's exactly what Hannibal did. His troops annihilated an entire huge Roman army, just wiped it out. Hannibal was literally on his way to Rome. He fought through Italy and he was going to Rome. However, he had a long trip from Carthage and his men were getting very weary and tired, and every battle he fought, he lost a few more men here and there. The Romans had what seemed almost like an infinite amount of troops as they gathered them from all of their territories. And it got to a point where, well, Hannibal just needed more men. He needed more money. He needed more weapons. Here comes the Soviets. And my question for them would be very simple. You are one of the most powerful nations in the world. And you're about to conquer the most powerful nation, the Empire of Rome. You've got it. Hannibal's going to win this battle. I understand the politics of if Hannibal wins this, he may, or the people may want him to be the ruler of all of Carthage. But stop being crazy. My question is this. Why wouldn't you just go ahead and send him the resources he needed to defeat the Roman army and to conquer all of Rome? Had he did that, Carthage would have been even stronger. And the people would have actually looked to you, the Soviets, for having come up with the brilliant idea to allow Hannibal to do this. You still would have remained in power, in my opinion, and Hannibal would have been a great war hero. So my question is, why didn't you help him finish off the Roman Empire? history would have remembered Carthage much, much, much differently. Instead, Hannibal had not enough men, and he eventually had to give up on the campaign. And he had to give up on another campaign because Rome knew that Carthage may have tried it again. And so the Romans came and do what they do. And they essentially ended the power base of Carthage as a result of what I believe is this mistake in the Punic War, the second one. All they had to do was give Hannibal the supplies. He had a strategy. He had essentially Rome up against the ropes, and they were about to fall. But the Sophists didn't allow Hannibal to throw that massive right uppercut to knock him out. Instead, they essentially threw in the towel when the fight was literally in the Carthaginians' favor. They were winning. Put it in boxing terms, they had already won 11 rounds in this 12-round fight. Clean 11. They got them. And Rome was just about wobbling and spaghetti leg, just about to fall down with like 5 seconds left in the 12th round, the final round. They had already been knocked down twice. There is a 3 knockdown rule in this fight. All it would have taken is that one more punch, or let the time expire, and Rome would have won. But no. They threw in the towel with 5 seconds left, and well, Rome was able to catch that one last sucker punch and took down Carthage. So my question, once again, to the Sophists of Carthage, why didn't you let Hannibal finish the job? I don't know. It's crazy. We're going to stick in ancient times for a little bit, and we're going to go to another question for another very, very interesting individual. One of the greatest and wisest, in fact, the wisest man who's ever lived, the richest king who's ever existed, Solomon. And I would have to sit down and ask him one question. Granted, I really do have two, but one more important than the other. I'll go ahead and tell you what the one is just because it's fun for me to just throw it out there. When the two women came in and had the baby argument, if both women had not gone ahead and said that it wasn't their baby, would he have actually cut the baby in half? That's just a real question. I just kind of wondered a little bit, just a little funny one. Would he have actually cut the baby in half? It's an interesting one, but the real question I have for King Solomon would not be about that. It would be about something that was in his treasure trove, something that was protected somewhere in his mind or in his temple somewhere, was, of course, the Ark of the Covenant. I'm just real curious. And I'd like to sit down with Solomon and ask him because it's something like that which was a high priority for the Israelites back then. Absolutely, the most important treasure they had was in the Ark. And it was left in his care. Granted, he had priests and he had advisors who probably moved things around in and out throughout his castle and his temple. Of course, with his approval. Of course, with his approval. Turns out that the Ark has been lost for centuries. And my question would be to him, where was it at the last time you saw it? Just a question. Where was the Ark at the last time you saw it? Where was it the last place you left it? And we're talking about the set of car keys that everybody can't find. You sometimes put them down on your table and you don't really think about it when you're walking out the door and you realize you don't have it. The Ark is much bigger than a set of car keys and a lot more precious. So my thought process would have to be that somehow, some way, King Solomon knew where the Ark was at all times. At all times. So the last time that we hear about the Ark and its location is in Second Chronicles of 35 and 3 in the Bible. That's the last recorded time we hear about the Ark. Second Chronicles 35 and 3. So somewhere between Second Chronicles 35 and 3 and Second Chronicles 35 and 4, the Ark is, let's just say, misplaced, lost to history. And I'd like to ask Solomon that single question. Not necessarily, I'm not going to ask him where it is, but I just want to know where it was the last time he saw it. Because my theory is that one of his advisors or one of the priests may have hidden it in the Solomon's mind, which of course we don't know where that is either, because they didn't want the invaders to take the Ark. So my question would be to him personally, where it was last time he saw it. Let's see. Here we go. This one is a question for my fandom. We're gonna go my fandom, then we're gonna go back into history again because this one's really on me. I would like to sit down with the 49ers head coach Kyle Shanahan, who is a legacy in the NFL, who's got branches of his coaching tree all over the place in the National Football League now. The son of a great head coach, a great offensive coordinator. In fact, the one who helped win the 49ers their last Super Bowl. Broke that record for most touchdowns scored in a Super Bowl that year with Mike Shanahan, Kyle's dad, his offensive game plan and play calling. Then he went after a while and moved to Denver. Mike did, and he was able to take John Elway and win back-to-back Super Bowls. Finally, he ends up in Washington with both two quarterbacks that one that the ownership liked and one that he liked. And of course, Robert Griffin III was the quarterback that the ownership liked, and somehow they were still able to draft Kirk Cousins. Now, Kyle began to really become a bit of himself after he had that nightmare defeat. But it seems like he had his dad on his side when he was in Washington, and he did well. He learned even closer from his father in an actual work environment. So when he became the offensive coordinator in Atlanta and had what is probably the greatest meltdown of all time of an offense, being up 28-0 in the Super Bowl and then losing, only to then become the head coach of the 49ers. And in 2019 did something absolutely amazing between him and John Lynch. They put together a team. As I was looking at it from my own perspective, nobody was there when I said it, and I wish they were, because I would have gladly loved to have been on record for this when I started seeing the 49ers being built in 2019, the free agents that they picked up, the draft pick, Bosa, seeing how Like Sanders was coming together, all this stuff, the offense and the defense were melting together. Jimmy Garoppolo was healthy. I actually made, and I said, this team could go to the Super Bowl, which of course I was right. They did. They went, and they played Kansas City, and Patrick Mahomes was behind with 6 minutes left by 10. And somehow Kyle Shanahan just couldn't maintain the offense. And they lost the Super Bowl when they were up by 10 in the fourth quarter. Another meltdown for Kyle Shanahan. Another horrible meltdown. Then, fast forward to last year, the 2023 season. Brock Purdy had a near MVP season. They get all the way to the Super Bowl again. Different quarterback. The offense was even stronger with Christian McCaffrey. The defense was even stronger with Chase Young next to on the other side of Bosa, his defensive end. And they led the game until they didn't. And it got all the way to overtime. And they were waiting to win the game because they had broken the tie. And yet again, Kyle Shanahan lost another Super Bowl in the worst possible way. 3 seconds left on the clock in overtime. And you win. 3 seconds. But they couldn't hold the Chiefs out of the end zone for 3 seconds. And the 49ers were defeated again. My question for Kyle Shanahan would be this. Do you feel that when the pressure is on at the highest level, that you just can't get it done? I would like to ask him that question because his father not only got it done at the highest level, he had, there was no question that they were going to win. 49ers ended up winning that game 49-26. There was newspaper clippings of that 49ers Super Bowl calling it not the Super Bowl, but the Super Bore because the 49ers ate up the Chargers so bad. Denver was near invincible for 2 straight years, and they just ate alive their opponents in the Super Bowl and throughout the playoffs. They looked invincible. There was no doubt that Denver was going to win. There was no doubt that the 49ers of 94 were going to win. But it just seemed like the Falcons had it made. Just seemed like Shanahan's 49ers were going to win the Super Bowl twice. But to use a horrible quote, Kyle Shanahan is very able to snatch victory, snatch defeat out of the jaws of victory. He can get that defeat, no problem. Just when it looks like you're going to win, nope. And my question once again to him is, does he feel that he has no ability to win in the big game? Deep down inside, guttural feeling, just you and me sitting down, no cameras, no microphones, you and me. What do you, in your heart of hearts, believe? Do you think that you just can't get it done because of these horrible, horrible failures? I mean, Marv Levy, he went to the Super Bowl 4 times, the Buffalo Bills, back to back to back to back. And each time, the spread got wider. They lost by more every time. His team was not as highly ranked in position every time. They were worse every year, but they kept getting there. Like he literally went from being the best team in the AFC against the Giants. I believe that was the year he was the best team in the AFC to just barely making it into the wild card and getting torn apart by the Cowboys. I mean, that's just what it was. And I don't know if Marv Levy felt that way, but it certainly looks like Kyle Shanahan. You look at his appearance, just his physical appearance, between the way he was before they lost that last Super Bowl and the way he looks right now. He looks a little disheveled. He looks a little unsure of himself. And they're saying Brock Purdy is a little unsure of himself. But you look at the coach, and you sort of see that he's sort of reflecting what his coach is doing. So, Kyle, that's what I would want to know. Very sincerely, heartfelt, as a fan, to a coach, I would like to ask him that question. Now, speaking of heartfelt, everybody's had a friend. Everybody's had somebody that they trusted. Everybody has had one person who they trusted with everything they had. But they just knew that this friend of theirs, well, just may not be the guy that they wanted him to be. Now, in this case, the friend who turned on the other friend, he kind of knew that it was going to happen. He just knew it. Like sometimes people know that there's a friend of yours, and you're just like, we're friends, but there's just something I don't know. But this guy knew, and he was waiting for it to happen. I would very much appreciate taking the time machine, going back, oh, somewhere around 30 and 33 AD. Sit down with, of all people, the one person that has a question that an answer that I would like to get from him. And that's Judas Iscariot. Judas. I have a question for Judas. What would I ask him? Was the silver not enough? No. I would sit Judas down and I would ask him, my friend, you are one of the 12 people that Jesus considered his best friends. You were one of his best friends. You knew him for 3 years better than anybody. He told everybody that he was going to be, that somebody was absolutely going to turn him in not so many words. He knew he was going to be betrayed. He even knew who it was going to be. What I want to know from Judas is, you knew who he was. You knew what you were going to do. And after you did it, you felt disgusted because in your mind, you didn't think you were, but you just did it. And for the prophecy, you had to do it. There was no way out of it. You were going to do it. But there's literally nothing that said that you couldn't have gone to the crucifixion and asked for forgiveness. My question is, knowing who Jesus was, why didn't you ask for forgiveness? Just a thought, just a thought. He loved you like a brother, Judas. He absolutely would have forgiven you, but you didn't ask. Why? Why didn't you ask? That would be my question for Judas. Why didn't you ask for forgiveness? Now we're going to go with the two more questions for two more people. I'm trying to decide where I want to go with this. Um, because both of these are pretty interesting. Um, let's go with this one first. Vice President Kamala Harris, you got to run for President of the United States because, no conspiracy theory here, Joe Biden felt that he was unable to run for re-election. I'm going to make this one very short and very sweet because it could come up with a lot of different weird things, and people will definitely think of this very negatively. But my question would be to you, Miss Kamala Harris. If you thought that President Biden wasn't fit to run for 4 more years of office, why then do you think he was fit to continue as president? One more time. If you thought that President Biden wasn't fit to run for re-election, why do you think he was fit to continue to stay in office? Now, knowing what we know now about the election, and Vice President Harris was beaten by Donald Trump, President Trump, there was an absolute avenue for Vice President Kamala Harris to become president, even if it was for a short time. She could have still been the first female president. And some people would have thought it was dirty and underhanded. But if you think about it, and you wanted to go on the track of what's best for the country, once again, I say, if you believe that President Biden was unfit to run for re-election, that would make me think that maybe he's unfit for his current role as president, which means that could have started the motions in order to remove him from office for being unfit. And if that was to have happened, boom, next in line, Kamala Harris, sworn in as the 47th president of the United States. She would be president, although it would have been a short time because of the election coming up. She would still have been the first ever female president of the United States. And, well, I think that she dropped the ball on that personally. Just just me, because the idea that you're essentially going to Atlantic City, you got the dice in your hand, you're blowing real hard, hoping that you just get the right number, right? Roll the dice. All right, it's 47. That's what the election was. You had short time to run, and you had an opportunity that almost House of Cards like could have put you in the presidency for even a short period of time. Now, my thing is, like I say, I'm an independent, but hear me out on this one a little bit before I go back to my question. If she had taken the steps to say that Joe Biden was no longer fit for office and become the president of the United States and still ran for election because she would have just simply taken over for him for this short time and there's still an election cycle going on. So she would still have to run again in order to make sure that she became president. I think that if she had become president, there's a more than likely chance that she may have, I don't know, maybe she would have won the election because it's like, hey, she's president. Let's keep her president. I could be wrong. People might have just been satisfied with, well, she did it. She was the first ever. We don't have to worry about it. And just, she would lost anyway. But that's a very interesting what if. How would that have played out had she actually taken the reins of the presidency prior to the election? But in truth, I would love to have her sit right in front of me in my office, nobody else around, just me and her, take the Secret Service out, and ask her that question. Why didn't you do it? Because you would have become president. You would have had that, even if it was short lived, you would have still been president of the United States. There's only would have been 47 listed. I think 45 in total, actual people. 46, I can't remember how many it is. But you would have been less than 50 people who held the office of president of the United States in over 200 plus years. You'd have been amongst a very, very, very small minority of people. And you'd have been the only female amongst that group. I just, I don't know. The temptation just seems like it would have been impossible to overlook. And it just, to me, it just seems like it almost would have had to have happened. But I would want to know, Madam Vice President, why didn't you take that step to become the president? Finally, I have one more question, and this one is of my grandmother, Rose May Smith. A question that I didn't think about until years after her passing. And in fact, I think it was, as I'm sitting here in 2024, I don't think I thought about this until 2023, maybe late 2023, maybe even earlier this year. The thought came to mind. Well, let's start off with her dates. She was born October 31st, 1925, about 99 years ago. She passed November 4th, 2009. No, she passed November 1st, 2009. Her funeral was November 4th. She passed literally the day after her birthday. World War II started November. No. World War II started uh, September 1st, 1939, and it didn't end until 45. Meaning, when World War II started, my grandmother was a teenager, 14, 15, somewhere in the neighborhood. And all the time that I knew her, this was 31 years, and as much history as I loved, I never thought to ask one very simple, stupid question. What was it like for the people, the black people in Barnegat, New Jersey, little town, during World War II? She was more than old enough to have noticed things were a little off. Granted, you're still a kid, but boys her age, a little older, 15 to 18, were trying to change their age, sort of sneak in and try to get into the World War II once we entered the war. So it's not like she wouldn't have been cognizant of what was going on. So I would really like to know, but I didn't ask. I think that was the dumbest thing I did. I should have asked. What was it like? What was the temperature of the area? How did it feel? Was it different when you went to a store because of the tension surrounding World War II? That's just something that I never asked her, her sister, or either of her brothers. Granted, her brothers would have been younger, would have been under 10, if my memory serves me correct. They might not have had quite the same memories of World War II as my grandmother or her sister, who was a couple of years older. But I never thought to ask. And, well, I'm not going to get to. One of those things I wish I had done. And on that note, I'm going to ring the bell at the end of this main event and move on towards the Spear of the Week. Now, the Spear of the Week this week is a very special one because around my house I have some really big trees and I enjoy those trees and I think it's kind of neat. The last 4 years I've been living here, been noticing one squirrel in particular, and I call him Jonathan, and he's got a family as of last year. See his there was a couple of little squirrels running around. And recently, as I'm recording this, probably about a week and a half, I heard the most horrible sound from my little squirrel friend at night. I heard an owl. Yeah, I hadn't heard an owl in my life, but I can definitely tell you that it was an owl. I'm sure of it. And it was floating around somewhere near my house, meaning that it was looking for some rodents to eat. Now, Jonathan and his family are, well, they're small, and owl is a predator. If he found them at night, he would feast on them. And then just yesterday, as I'm recording, I saw another threat. This giant hawk, another bird of prey that I had not seen in this area in 4 years. Massive wingspan, probably I don't even know what it was. It was gigantic. I mean, it was massive, and he too was very very close to the trees in my house. Not in those trees, but across the street. And he was looking for food too. So the spear of the week absolutely would have to be to protect my friend Jonathan the squirrel on that gigantic hawk and that hungry owl. Don't you eat my friend. Now I'm going to go back to just sort of revisit week 12. I know I'm already off kilter and I'm going to have to catch up on the later show. But week 12, I picked the Minnesota Vikings to beat the Bears 20-10. I have the Commanders eating up the Cowboys 30-14. Chiefs, they're going to be mad because they lost against the Bills, and they're going to eat up the Lions. They're not the Lions. They're going to eat up the Panthers 35-7. It's going to be a blowout. I'm pretty sure. Tampa Bay Bucks are going to beat the Giants 35-10. And a game that I hate to bet against the 49ers, but I'm going to. I think the Packers are going to win 27-20. My record as of before week 12, 31-24, still head above water, and hopefully it'll stay that way. And now I want to go into a little bit of week 13, because by the time this airs, I'll have had the scores for that game as well, that week as well. And in week 13, I've picked San Diego Chargers to beat the Falcons 24-17. The Commanders win again, this time against the Titans 24-9. Tough AFC game, Bengals and Steelers. Even though the Steelers have dominated, the Bengals seem like they're just not quite any good. I think that it's going to be a tough one because it's a division game. And I like the Bengals here because they're at home, 24-20. The Eagles and the Ravens. Well, I think those giant Eagles are going to get beat by the Ravens because they can run the ball. As long as the Ravens do it, they're going to run all over the Eagles, and it's going to be 38-20. 49ers, I originally picked them to win against Buffalo 42-35. I'm going to keep that. I'm going to hope for the best. I'm going to hold my nose and hope for the best. Even though it is going to be in Buffalo. So they're going to be in 2 weeks, horribly frigid weather in most likely in Green Bay and in Buffalo. These warm weather guys played in colder weather from time to time when they were in college and high school and all that stuff. So, but it's not Buffalo and it's not Green Bay, and I expect that my prediction of 42-35 is gonna be off by quite a bit. Now we're gonna take this show to a close by telling you the background of this episode is a painting that I call Mix. This painting is an interesting one because the spaces that you see and some of the ones you don't, because there's still more to this painting than what you can tell, have a very distinctive mix to every single paint that is in each one of these blocks. I just chose that not use any straight, and I mixed paint on every single one. You may be able to find these paint colors in a bottle somewhere, but not the bottles that I used. I had to mix every single one in order to get the colors that you see. Join us on our Facebook group, the LIP Facebook group. Join us. There's always room for one more. I'm always posting on Facebook and Instagram where you will find all kinds of videos. And Instagram, I'm at Philip Henderson 5102. Of course, this show is going to be aired on YouTube, as all of my shows are from now on. And you can find me at Phil the Lip. Subscribe to at Phil the Lip. Now it's time for the words of wisdom. Of course, these words of wisdom go out there to some of those people who you see around that are just a little off, and you can tell they're not going anywhere. Their direction's a little off kilter. they don't quite have an exact direction. I would look at them and say, yo, you must be going the wrong way because you're following me. I'm actually going someplace. Once again, you must be going the wrong way because you're following me. I'm actually going somewhere. All right. I believe that's enough for this week. And I had a lot of fun asking these questions. Who knows? Maybe one day this show might get large enough where I might actually be able to come across to Kyle Shanahan or Vice President Kamala Harris and get them off camera and say, off the record, I have a question for you. I'm not going to ask it on camera. I'm not going to ask it. No mics, no nothing. Take all this stuff off, put it outside the room, and I'm going to ask you this question. And I want you to be perfectly honest with me, and I will sign an affidavit saying that I will never speak a word of what I'm asking you, and ask the two of them the questions of that I had already posed. And I would love them to give me that answer. But of course, you never know, right? But on that note, my name is Phil, and you've just listened to The Whip.